Hello and welcome to the Atlanta Democratic Socialist panel on the PRO Act. My name is Nolan Huber-Rhoades. I am a member of Atlanta DSA, and I am super excited to be here with my co-host Asia Arnold. And tonight we're going to be talking a lot about labor organizing in the South, the history behind it, and hearing from people on the front lines of labor organizing around the country, but specifically here in the South. And one reason in particular that I'm excited to be talking about the PRO Act is because labor organizing and being able to organize labor is so integral to every part of what we're trying to do in building this new world and moving toward a socialist society. And labor has something to do with us getting a Green New Deal passed. It has something to do with us getting Medicare for all. It has something to do with the abolition of police and prisons. It really intersects with so much of what we're trying to do and the world that we're trying to build. And so I'm really excited to be here tonight. And that's one of the reasons why I'm here. I'm going to pass it over to Asia to introduce herself and talk about why she's here.
Yeah, thanks, Nolan. My name is Asia Arnold. I am the founding editor of the Mainline magazine based in Atlanta, Georgia, independent journalist and member of the American Press Association, member of the Freelancers for the PRO Act, DSA member, among other things. So I am here today, one of many reasons Nolan, as you discussed, we're in a very unique and important time. We're on the precipice of something very, very important in our society, especially for the working class. This has been building on for years. I started tuning into this around 2016 when Sanders was first running for president, and it's been building up, and now this is the us portion of it. And following what happened in Best the Vote in Bessemer, Alabama with Amazon, we just have a lot to unpack and talk about how we're going to move forward as a movement and educate ourselves on unions and how they work in labor organizing in general. So I'm really excited to be here to connect those dots and hopefully connect labor issues with literally everything else. We talk about abolishing the prison industrial complex. We're talking about police brutality. There's been a new rash of police brutality just in Georgia. These things are all interconnected. So I'm excited to explore that with our guests today. So thanks. Before we get down to some intros, I want to, if I can, take a minute to discuss just very briefly about how the PRO Act works. And because as someone who recently stepped into researching this and someone who's from the South where they don't want us to talk about unionizing. They don't want us to be educated on how to organize. So before the PRO Act came along and I started reporting on it, I didn't really know much about it. And in my research, I did find out, and I just want to share, it can get confusing with legal terms and jargon. So we're going to take a minute to just briefly explain how the PRO Act works. So as I mentioned, there's been a lot of discourse surrounding the PRO Act, but it does exactly as it names. It protects the right to organize. However, a lot of misinformation complicated something that can boil down pretty easily. And we might get into that in the panel today with the ABC test and things like that. But essentially, the National Labor Relations Act only covers those it defines as employees. The law prohibits employers from retaliating against covered individuals for their concerted activity, a broad category that includes organizing, discussing wages, and working together to improve work conditions. The NLRA uses a complex multi-factor test to determine who is a covered employee and who is not. Over the years, the NLRA has modified its implementation of this test, focusing on different factors to broaden or narrow coverage. As things stand right now, however, the NLRA does not cover so-called gig workers, independent contractors, freelancers, or 1099 workers. The PRO Act would bring stability to the NLRA's definition of employee by settling the employee or independent contractor question with the ABC test. Unlike AB 5 that we saw in California, the PRO Act would not affect these workers' classification under other laws, nor would it entitle them to benefits over time or employee tax treatment through a W-2. Instead, the PRO Act would confer with the NLRA's rights on these workers, allowing them to engage in concerted activity with meaningful protections and to unionize if they choose through the NLRB's process. So with that, I want to kick it back to my co-host, Nolan. And if you want to take a minute to discuss, introduce our guests or connect the labor movement.
Yeah, so thank you, Asia. You froze a little bit there, but that's all right. So I'm just going to take a minute to invite each guest up here to introduce themselves and to share a little bit of why they're passionate about the PRO Act. So first, I'm going to bring up Tedwood Strong. They are a union organizer at Communications Workers of America. Tedwood, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey, y'all. Yeah, I'm Ted Wood. I use they, them pronouns. I'm a campaign lead with Communications Workers of America under the Campaign to Organize Digital Employees, or CODE. You might be familiar with them. We worked on the Alphabet Workers Union campaign, Medium Workers, Voltage, Glitch, and most recently and locally to Atlanta, Floyd County Productions, which is the largest animation studio in the South. Why am I passionate about the PRO Act? I'm generally not passionate about U.S. labor law. It's a fucking dumpster fire, which is why I'm excited about the PRO Act. It mostly, it provides restrictions against employers, but it also enables them to do plenty during any unionizing campaign to dissuade workers and coerce them out of wanting to fight for their interests. So that's why I'm here.
Yeah, thank you so much. Next, I'm going to bring up Kellie Morgan. Kellie is the political director for the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. Kellie, why are you passionate about the PRO Act?
I also want to add that I am an organizer with the District Council 77, but the passion stems from the fact that we have not had a comprehensive labor reform for 83 years. And so as an organizer and my team, we experience like we are literally throwing darts at a wall, trying to make things stick, because we have to be innovative as organizers, where these union busters get to use the same tactics over and over again. What we saw happen in Amazon, we see here happening in our campaigns as well. So we as workers not only deserve, but we have to, the fight that we have to go through to be able to preserve our labor rights is just, it's tiresome. So this PRO Act will actually give us a chance to make sure that we create union density within the South and across the United States.
Thank you so much, Kellie. And last but definitely not least, I'm going to bring up James Williams, the president of Atlanta, North Georgia Labor Council.
Yeah, I would say this is the most powerful labor legislation since the Wagner Act. And like the colleagues before me have stated, I'm also an organizer as well as president of the Atlanta Labor Council. So our job is to organize workplaces and bring them into the union family. And yes, we have things like captive audience meetings. We have where workers are fired or terminated for organizing on the workplace. There are certain states and certain union organizations where we're not allowed to even go onto the job site and speak to the people. It's against the law for us to do so. And this bill would prohibit most of that. And one of the main things it would do is if you are an employee of a company that wants to organize and they terminate you for collective action to organize that company, you can now file a civil lawsuit against that corporation. You're not just forced to go through the NLRB and do an unfair labor practice suit against that company. You as a citizen can sue that company yourself. And so that's one of the bigger steps within the PRO Act.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think something that we should all just go ahead and start on is the Bessemer, what happened in Bessemer, Alabama. And I know that that's something that's on the minds of all of us, especially those of us who care about labor organizing around the United States. So I'd like to start with you, James, to come back up here and talk about what happened in Bessemer and maybe how you're feeling after the vote results, and what would change if we did have the PRO Act.
yourself? Yeah, there were a lot of I mean, there were a lot of things that Amazon did to prevent this. One of the things that they did is they hired over 1,500 new employees to dilute the pool of people that were going to be voting, and they actually won under the Trump administration's NLRB the right to expand the people that were going to be voting to unionize from around 3,000 to 3,200 up to 5,700 employees. They also had captive audience meetings where you were in a closed room and they were discussing the union and why you shouldn't go for a union. And when employees asked questions about it, they made them come to the front of the room, they scanned their badges, and then had follow-up one-on-one, not really one-on-one, 5-on-1 conversations with those people. And then they ended up finding reasons to terminate them. There was one employee that was out there that was just trying to badge in to go to work, and his badge would not activate, and so he could not enter. And a person from theft prevention or loss prevention showed up and said that we would get back to you within 48 hours. And he just had questions like, am I fired? Can I go to work? Why am I not being able to get access to my job? And Amazon has hired the Bessemer Police Department to patrol the plant and to curtail union organizing on that plant. And that young man was arrested and spent the night in jail, simply because he wanted to help organize the plant. They gave him no reasoning for it. But that day at 7 o'clock in the morning, when he was trying to start his shift, he was put in handcuffs, put in a car, and thrown in jail. And he's a father, so his family didn't know where he was, didn't know what was going on. The RWDSU and their lawyers were able to get him out of jail, but this is the type of things. They hired intelligence operatives inside Amazon to monitor all the activity that was going on inside that facility, including the vote was done vote by mail. And so one of the things with the way union elections go is if you don't vote under current law, it's considered a no vote. It's not like that vote is just discarded and you only count the folks that voted. If there is a no vote, or if there is a non-vote, somebody doesn't vote in the election, then it is considered a no vote or a strike against organizing. And Amazon established with the United States Postal Service a mailbox right outside their facility with a camera mounted above it so they could monitor who was dropping off their ballots and who wasn't. So a lot of these things would have been corrected or mitigated with the PRO Act and not allowed to happen.
Great, thank you. Sorry, y'all, for my technical difficulties earlier. I have my camera turned off now, so hopefully that helps the issue. James, thank you for talking to us more about what happened in Bessemer. Kellie, I wanted to kick it over to you because you were sharing that these tactics that we saw on behalf of Amazon are not unique at all. And if I can just briefly describe what I mean, we know that Amazon workers in Bessemer were absolutely bombarded with anti-union messaging. Some employees were saying they were receiving up to 20 text messages a day of anti-union messaging. Can you tell us more about what these tactics look like and where we may see them elsewhere?
Yeah, so here in the metro area of Atlanta, we actually had a campaign with glass workers at a shop called Ameristar Screen and Glass. And the workers actually came to us to organize because there was a noose that was walked around the shop. Comments like Black Lives Don't Matter were made, and there was a clear distinction in pay between Black and white workers. And so we came to help them unionize, but when the union busters actually came in, they sat them down in mandatory meetings during work hours and spat all type of lies about how the union is actually not going to help you and that we can provide. They bribed them with false bonuses, cars. It was wild, the things that actually happened within those meetings. Whereas we as organizers did not have the opportunity to speak with these workers on their work time. And we had to actually go make house visits. It was just that much harder for us to engage these workers. Other tactics were, besides bribery and having them in these meetings, they actually had the workers sign a blank letter and then put a false narrative after the fact. So it was a lot of tactics that these tactics are not new. They don't have to be innovative because there is currently no law that is actually supporting the workers' right to organize. And I would just like to say, if just like James mentioned that this is a vote, if this was to happen to our right to vote in a regular election, there will be an uproar. We just saw it with the anti-voting bill, but this is happening in union elections, and this is still something that there's not a lot of attention towards.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kelly. I think a large anti-union, anti-worker push has been to paint the labor movement as a primarily white movement, and has largely tried to get labor away from its legacy with the civil rights movement, and the ways that civil rights and labor rights, workers' rights, are so deeply connected. So I appreciate you bringing some of that into it as well. Ted Wood, I want to kick it over to you to talk about your experience with some of these tactics that we saw in Bessemer, and why do we have laws in the United States that allow this bullshit?
Wow, why do we have laws in the United States that allow capitalists to unilaterally make decisions and influence workers' agency? I don't know. That is, yeah, that question kind of goes down to the root of everything, doesn't it? But as far as my experience with these tactics, I just filed a ULP today, like 6 hours ago. And for those of you who don't know what a ULP is, it's an unfair labor practice. It's the procedural filing for when an employer violates labor law. In this case, it was management at Floyd County changed some NDA policies in response to this adorable cartoon that the workers made to inspire each other to act in solidarity with one another. And for some context with that, like on March 1st, they went public with a majority of their coworkers having signed authorization cards indicating that they wanted to have a union at their workplace. In almost any other country in the world, they would have a union already through a process we call card check. Instead, here in the United States, the employer has the choice to not voluntarily recognize them and to put them through a process of an NLRB election. Usually that will take 4 to 6 weeks if they're lucky. And during that period of time, they can do captive audience meetings. And for those of you who don't know what a captive audience meeting is, it basically means that your employer can pay everybody who works for them, have them on paid time to listen to them. They can make the meeting mandatory and basically go through all of the reasons they don't think a union will be necessary. And we can talk about those tactics later, but that basically means that they can outspend the workers because the workers have to meet off company time. They have to meet during their lunch breaks. They have to meet after work. They have to find times where, you know, the parents who work there have a convenient time where they're not taking care of their kids or trying to put them to bed, where they can actually talk to them about their work issues. So, you know, that's kind of the crux of like why this is completely unfair. And as Kelly said before, the policies haven't changed in, you know, over 80 years. It just requires an update. And companies find ways to get around the law all of the time. You can consider that you don't have any rights at work because they won't respect them.
Yeah, there's an expression, power yields power. I think just like go back to Nolan's question about like the why do they allow this? It's like for the powers that be to expand their power through corporations, and then the mass efforts of mis and disinformation to actually manufacture consent among workers that, you know, unions are the takers rather than making material conditions improve for them. So thank you for that. I do want to zoom in on Georgia during this panel, if we can, specifically like Georgia issues, very specific when it comes to labor organizing. But first, so Kelly, will you talk to us about, Georgia is one of 27 right to work states. We are also an at-will state, but as is every other state except for Montana. Will you tell us what the right to work state laws means for workers like you and me and businesses in Georgia?
Yeah, so before we even address what it means, I would like to talk about the origin. So right to work originated to maintain the Jim Crow South, right? Basically, it is a way to destroy labor unions and the freedom of collective bargaining. There was a man called Vance Muse who was a white supremacist, anti-Semitic, and also a corporate lobbyist who feared that unions would allow Black workers and white workers to join the same labor union, but also it was more so not even about Black workers in particular, it was Black men and Black women working together. Very interesting. So this racist law is in place in 27 states. Currently, I know in 2016, Alabama passed it to put it in their constitution, and Tennessee is currently in the fight to do the same. But it allows workers to receive union representation without paying union dues. And of course, we know that the dues are not just because we want to collect money. The dues actually help towards organizing efforts and actually go into allowing us to employ people to go and talk to workers and bring worker issues and be able to expand our union density. And so what we know about right to work laws is that wherever they exist, there are lower wages, the benefits for workers are poor, the safety and protections of workers are horrible, and basically there are no workers' freedom does not exist. I know that Martin Luther King made a comment. We were talking about how civil and labor rights go hand in hand. He named right to work as a false slogan. It's a misnomer. I like to call it the right to work for less. A lot of people do. It's a cliche, but it's true. Right to work for less. And it's a law that basically weakens and destroys our civil rights and our job rights. And so, of course, this is something that the South, I think, ironically pushes because the South likes to think of themselves as conservative and not allow the government into their business. But basically what you're doing is allowing the government to come between two private entities, the workers and your job, and say, no, you can't have collective bargaining. So it's ironic, but it is basically a way to weaken union strength and union density. And that's why it's very hard to organize the South.
Thank you. James, I want to kick it over to you and ask you to tell us a little bit more about the North Georgia Labor Council and specifically some of the ways that right to work impacts the work that you're doing.
Okay, yeah, so the Atlanta North Georgia Labor Council, we're a subset of the AFL-CIO. We're chartered by the American Federation of Labor and the Congress of Industrial Organizations. And we're an association. So Kellie's union, IUPAT, District 77, they're an affiliate of our organization. We have 58 affiliates that represent around 60,000 workers in our 18 county jurisdiction in the Atlanta metro area. And so our job at the Labor Council is, if the painters are having an organizing campaign, we've got IBEW having an organizing campaign, and we just helped out the Teamsters with settling their contract with Republic Waste, is we're a collection. So one of the old sayings is a grievance against one is a grievance against all. So if the painters are working on an organizing campaign and there's any way that we can help and we can bring other union entities into that organizing campaign, we will absolutely do that. We also have politics. Our jurisdiction is municipal, so we're under city and county races. Statewide and state legislator races are done by the state AFL-CIO. So we also work in politics to try to get legislators elected that will help support working families. And that's the one thing, even though we are a union entity, we don't just work for union workers. We're here to support all the working families in the state of Georgia. because, a rising tide lifts all ships. And I know we're throwing a lot of cliches out here, but it's very true. What we can do to help out our workers will also help out other workers in the state. And we just want to make sure that they have the protections that they need, that there are safe working conditions, that they're not being treated like robots, like Amazon having to pee in a bottle on a truck because the truck detects that you've stopped for too long. One of the things that was happening that happens at all Amazon facilities is you wear basically a marker or a tracker on you, and if you're not moving a package every 15 seconds, it notates that. So if you have to go to the bathroom and you have to walk 50 yards to go to the bathroom, and that bathroom's occupied, and you got to walk 150 yards to the next one, it's tracking you. And once you get so many dings on your record, which I believe is 2 hours over the course of a month, you're terminated for that. And we are human beings, we are not machines. And so we shouldn't be treated as such. And so that is part of what the Atlanta Labor Council does. An example is today we just finished, there are a lot of unemployed workers through COVID. And so with one of our affiliates, the operating engineers, and then another affiliate, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, we set up a training course to give unemployed workers a forklift certification and then an OSHA 10 certification. So they can take those two certifications and go get a job that pays around $15 an hour. And so we've also done food distributions, we've done COVID testing. We're out to support the community and we're out to support the workers in our area. That's the main goal.
Awesome, thank you. I didn't know that you all worked with non-union workers too. You all work with all workers. That's great. I want to pose a question that any of you all can jump on and answer just about the organizing process. But first I want to share just a story from my own reporting experience on a working class issue in Georgia after the outbreak of COVID to lead to this question. And a little extra background means I come from the restaurant industry as well. So in some of my reporting last year to back up, we all know that Georgia was the first state to open back up after the COVID outbreak. Governor Brian Kemp, I also personally reported, he lied in his own town hall saying that he didn't know the virus was asymptomatic, but he did know, and then he passes a legislation that protects businesses from being held liable for any harms caused related to COVID-19. So what that means is if with this new law in place that was passed last year, if a worker got sick with COVID while on the job, they couldn't seek out a civil lawsuit against the employer, even if it happened on property. James is nodding his head, so I think I got that right. So restaurant workers at one restaurant group in Atlanta blew the whistle on some malpractices in the after COVID-19, in which they were letting restaurant workers in a very popular restaurant in the Krog Street Market by the Beltline, where a lot of revenue is brought into the city of Atlanta. Restaurant managers and owners were letting them come in after not fulfilling the whole COVID quarantine period after testing positive, not believing employees when they were saying that they were having symptoms, not doing proper testing requirements and things like that. That spurred me into talking with restaurant workers about their options. And I think that many of them felt like they didn't have any. When it came to organizing. I received a lot of people that came forward to talk about instances of racism, sexual assault, sexual harassment, and it goes far deeper beyond the coronavirus, right? So to any of you who might want to answer this question, for workers who feel hopeless in their situation, and if it's a matter of not knowing their rights, what do you say to workers in precarious situations like that in Georgia, and what could an organizing process look like? James, please go ahead.
Yeah, so the bill that passed the legislature last year in actually it was July of 2020, the corporate immunity bill, basically states that no business entity is liable unless they are found grossly negligent. And I know everyone has seen the signs outside of buildings basically saying enter at your own risk. If you purchase a ticket, it'll have the same disclaimer on there. The disgusting thing about this bill is that if I don't put a sign outside my establishment, I am not grossly negligent. I'm only under the criminal statute normally negligent. So I would have to be in violation of about 3 or 4 other clauses of Georgia code to be found grossly negligent. So I don't even have to post a sign out. I don't have to have any documentation about procedures on the job site, as long as I try to keep everybody 6 feet apart or put a mask on or just basically do the bare minimum. I won't be found grossly negligent. And we fought extremely hard to prevent the initial bill from passing. And the current iteration just passed HB 112, which extends that sunset until next year. So I really am sorry for the workers that are out there. There really isn't much you can do other than make sure that you protect yourselves, make sure you wear a mask, make sure you stay away from your coworkers, wash your hands, and do your own due diligence, because the Georgia State Legislature has stated that they don't give a crap about the workers. They care about the corporations and they care about the profits. So you're on your own. Yeah, I'm sorry. that's just the way it is in Georgia.
And real quick, James, what would the PRO Act do to change that, if anything? Like, how does the PRO Act fit if it implemented on a federal level?
Okay, so what the PRO Act can do is, the main thing is organizing. One of the things that we have for our members is a collective bargaining agreement. And we also have, with most of our affiliates, there's a safety director, and we fall under OSHA guidelines. And so I'm a member of the IBEW. I'm the lobbyist for the IBEW at the Georgia State Capitol. And so we've been putting in strict enforcement on our job sites to make sure that the proper PPE is being put out. We actually got in place, they're building a Facebook data center down in Social Circle. And we got the contractor to basically purchase a little tracking device that all of our workers wear. I know it sounds scary, but it's to make sure that they're maintaining their social distance. So if I get within 6 feet of another worker on that job site, a little alarm will go off in my pocket, and I know to back up and stay away. And so we're utilizing those protections, and we're also making sure that our stewards on the job and the safety personnel on the job are following the CDC guidelines to a T. And if they're found in violation of that, we're filing grievances on them for that. So the PRO Act will allow workers in the state of Georgia to organize. And this is one of the reasons why, if the companies treated us the way we're supposed to be treated, like human beings, there would not be a need for a union. But unions have been around for over 140 years right now in the United States. And there hasn't been a single moment where there hasn't been a need for union representation on the job site to make sure that everyone goes home safely, goes home to their families, and gets to live their life the way they're supposed to. So the PRO Act helping us to organize these jobs. Even if we don't win the election, the organizing effort is going to make. I mean, Amazon raised their minimum wage to $15 an hour to try and fight the organizing effort. So if we can come in and put an organizing effort and make them implement safety standards to fight our organizing effort, then that's still a win for those workers, whether we win the election or lose the election.
I remember Amazon when they were fighting this, tweeting out things like, "Oh, we have a $15 minimum wage," which, James, you just said only happened because of organizing. And they would say, "Oh, we have a $15 minimum wage already. Companies should be mirroring what we're doing for our employees because we treat our employees so well." Like, they were just gaslighting their employees and the entire public from what they were experiencing on a daily level. And so organizing is just such a huge part of even being able to move companies to do something to treat workers like human beings. And I think that's huge.
And if I may,
Yeah.
just a little caveat there. The amount of money that Amazon made prior to COVID, or from the beginning of COVID till present day now, so before COVID hit, just the 12 to 14 month period, the amount of money that Amazon made, they could pay every single one of their workers in the United States $100,000 and still have more money now than they did when COVID hit. That's how much money they've made in the last 14 months. And they're giving us pennies saying $15 an hour minimum wage. Where's our health care? Where's our retirement? Where's our working conditions? They're not bringing any of that forward. And they have.
Wow. Yeah, thank you. I hadn't actually heard that statistic, so I appreciate you jumping in with that. Tedwood, I want to kick it over to you. Tell us a little bit more about CWA. And I know that this is like a big part of Georgia right now. So maybe tell us a little bit more about CWA and what challenges you faced due to it being Georgia being a right to work state.
Sure. So CWA is one of the oldest unions in the country. Typically, they have represented what you might think of as telecommunications workers, linemen, switchboard operators, people who laid the infrastructure for the current internet. So it only really makes sense for us to be organizing the tech industry. And, you might be familiar with the AFA and Sarah Nelson. That is also a subsidiary or an affiliate of CWA, along with the News Guild. So we've got a lot of stuff going on. In terms of how right to work has affected, my work and some of the workers that I've been working with and helping to organize. I think everybody said it already, like it exists to starve unions out of existence. It also creates this perception just by the branding and the name that, it's somehow it should be your chosen and blessed right to not be part of a union. So, it's not like over in California or, one of those IATSE guilds where you have to be a member of the union to work in the shop. You can choose not to be part of it if you want to. Honestly, I feel like we just need to not normalize that. You can be a person who receives the benefits that all of your coworkers fought for and bargained for with your employer and not pay a dime. And we call that person a scab. So I don't know. That's just where I land on the right to work stuff. I wanted to address some stuff that was going on before. Asia, I think your question about the hopelessness that people feel going into work under conditions, relating to what we have under right to work. I just wanted to say that, like, you're definitely not on your own. Other people are suffering and dealing with the same issues that you do, probably. And it's really just up to you to build those relationships. The concessions against all of this stuff, they're never given as gifts. What it's going to take in any drive to organize is to have a stronger relationship with each other than you do with management. So you're definitely not on your own, and there are things that you can do, especially having one-on-one conversations with coworkers and checking in on them and helping each other.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming back to that and saying that, because that was one message I wanted to get across when I had one-on-ones with these workers who were coming to me with their stories that I couldn't do much about, except connect with some attorneys. But I just wanted to remind them and everyone else that they are worth so much more than what they're getting. They are worth so much more than this. Like, we are worth more than $15 an hour. And James, I appreciate you putting that into context. The $15 an hour tactic of Amazon stepping up to do that at a time to kind of weaponize what has been a demand that is now too little too late, because now $15 an hour as a minimum wage is not enough. Like, we are far better than that, I just appreciate y'all adding all this context. And Tedwood, thank you for returning to that, because I think there are endless benefits to organizing that start with like interpersonal communications and building solidarity, because in solidarity we have so much more to gain than we ever do alone. And the individualistic nature of capitalism would have us believe otherwise, I think. Kellie, I want to come back to you, and I want to expand the conversation because we touched on it earlier. We talked about freelancers, gig workers, ICs, which is short for independent contractors, 1099s. One of the biggest issues that we're having right now is that there are so many what are called misclassified workers, who are essentially, these are people, I have been one, who is essentially working as a full-time employee, but they're misclassified as independent contractors, and it's essentially a loophole for employers to not pay the extra overhead that they need to pay for someone who's a W-2 status. And I also want to throw in here that, because I think a lot of people don't know this, because I just learned this today talking with someone else about the PRO Act earlier. You can be a W-2 worker for temporary, like a short length of time. It doesn't have to be forever. It doesn't mean, you can be a W-2 worker for 2 weeks, right? It's just, we're led to believe otherwise. So Kellie, you, IUPAT on your website, it mentions that, it lists off some different types of work, like industrial and commercial painting, drywall finishing, glazing and glasswork, sign and display, floor covering, installation. What do these allied trades in painting look like in the gig economy? Does this include gig workers or ICs? And if you want, as a bonus question, because you brought up inequity earlier, how has the gig economy disenfranchised Black and brown people up to this point?
Yeah, before I jump into that, we want to wrap up the right to work question, because this is about the PRO Act. The PRO Act will actually remove right to work from all of these 27 states. So this is another reason why we need to pass the PRO Act. But so back to the question. Currently, when we think about independent contractors, misclassified workers, the construction industry isn't really in the front of people's minds. They think about Uber, they think about the gig economy. And the reason why, James, I'll bring you up, is because a lot of construction trades are licensed and they have certain protections that come with it. Whereas the finishing trades, where we represent specifically painters and drywall finishers, we do not have a lot of protections because we aren't licensed trades. And so what we see is a lot of workers who are misclassified as independent contractors, even though they aren't, because the employer tells them when to come to work, where to come to work, what to do on the job, provides them their tools. And so they are actual employees, they're just misclassified. And like you said, the employer does this because they're able to skip out on paying Social Security, taxes, workman's comp. And if the worker isn't able to cover this, then it actually falls back on taxpayers. So it is a conversation that needs to be addressed because as taxpayers, we are paying more than we should be paying. But there's currently no entity in the state of Georgia that actually regulates or enforces any violations against employers who do this. But back to us as a trade, we see misclassification a lot in our trade. It's actually, I believe, 1 in 6 workers in the metro Atlanta area are misclassified and experience wage theft. And so what we do as a Band-Aid effect is, 1, allow these workers to come to wage theft clinics that we hold, to allow them to try to classify themselves as workers, even though a lot of workers do have this misconception that being an independent contractor is better for them because they do not understand that the money that they actually have to pay back. But and then also a result of misclassification is the wage theft. We hold these wage theft clinics so that we're able to recoup these lost wages of workers, whether it be overtime or just unpaid wages because the employer does not want to pay. You asked about Black and brown workers. So I would be remiss if I don't talk about the fact that both drywall finishers and painters are largely is made up of Black and brown workers, and one of the most abused workforces because take undocumented workers, for example. they have the two-faced reality. They have to, they don't have any type of entity to help them actually fight against wage theft if they are a misclassified worker. And then also they have the possibility, the real possibility of their employer calling ICE or threatening with deportation. So what we do as a union is we bring the community together to put pressure on these employers so that they know that these workers do not stand alone, to be able to recoup their wages. And so if you guys ever are in, like, look at our website and we have a campaign, we ask that the community come out to these to these delegations so that the worker knows that the worker knows, one, that there is solidarity with and there is support from the community, but that the employer also know that the community is going to hold these employers accountable for their abuses and exploitation of these workers.
Great, thank you. Before I ask another question, does anybody on the panel have anything to add or anything that they wanted to respond to from what Kellie said? Go ahead, James.
Yeah, we actually got the Commissioner of Labor, I want to say around 2012, to come out to the airport where there was a bunch of workers being misclassified, and they found 45 bricklayers that were all building the same wall, all with materials supplied by the contractor, all with, you know, the plans and everything set through. And Mark Butler found that that company was in violation of labor law, that those workers should have been classified as employees rather than independent contractors. And that is the last time we ever got Mark Butler to go out and actually do a survey on a job that we requested for that. And this is rampant in Atlanta, it's rampant in Georgia. And it's more pronounced in right-to-work states, but it's also catching up to those closed shop states as well.
Yeah, James, just while you're here, can you go into a little bit more about how the gig economy has affected? The question went away. Now I have to find it. How has the gig economy affected our country's more vulnerable communities and disenfranchised, already marginalized groups from high labor value?
So, in my opinion, they did a bait and switch. So when you first signed up to drive for Uber, you were getting probably 60 to 65% of the fare was going to the driver and not to Uber. Once they got their pool up and once they got a region covered properly with Uber drivers, they started reducing that. They started cutting away what the share went to the driver. And then they put the onus on us as the Uber rider to tip those workers and to spend more money when Uber is, you know, over $1 billion company. They could easily handle paying for insurance, healthcare, retirement, and all that out of the pool that they're going in. And also what the gig economy is doing is it's stripping away established organizations that are representing their workers well, that are taking care of their workers, and it's creating an uneven playing field. We fought a bill back in 2016 pardon me, called the Handy Bill, where you could get on your app on your phone and get a contractor to come out to your house to, I don't know, add a toilet, do some basic construction work on it. But those people within the bill that they were trying to pass would classify them, force them to be classified as independent contractors, and also waive any liability. So if you got on this app and the plumber came to your house and he installed a sink and that sink leaked all over and did water damage on your house, the Handy was not liable for it. The only recourse you would have is to try to go through that independent contractor. And as Kellie mentioned earlier, her trade is not licensed, but there's a lot of other unlicensed trades, so there's no regulatory recourse in the state of Georgia to go after these people. Yes, there is an electrical contractor's license, but that only allows you to pull a permit. There is no certification to be considered what we call a journeyman wireman or a certified electrician in the state of Georgia. It's only for contractors. So the gig economy is stripping people away, and it's diluting the pool, and it's taking away a lot of workers' benefits. And they dangle a big carrot that you can make money, and then once you get established, then they're squeezing and taking away the money that you were getting before. I was talking to some of the rideshare workers that are trying to organize in Atlanta, and they've been stripped between 15 and 20% of the fares are now going to Uber and not going to the actual drivers. And some of them are even going more egregious to where if you don't have a vehicle, you can lease your vehicle through Uber or through Lyft. So now you're driving a new car, but all of the money that you're making is going back to these corporations to pay for the leases on these vehicles. And it's a race to the bottom is basically what the gig economy is doing. Is it is creating a race to the bottom, and very few people are making money off of it.
Yeah, I think a race to the bottom is a great way to describe that. And I think a lot of folks don't realize that the gig economy is actually the odd job economy, just like rebranded. It's like a circle drawn around the odd job economy that was already benefiting few and like harming so many. So I kind of want to talk about a little bit more about the mis and disinformation stuff that we've seen around the PRO Act so far. I think that so far it's been pretty, freelancers were an interesting wedge that was driven into, like, of all the sectors of like workers, the freelancers was this wedge driven about the PRO Act. Is like, that was the one thing that they, being powers that be or corporations or whoever, could find to really drive that. And that's what brought me into this work as a journalist and joining the Freelancers for the PRO Act. And essentially our purpose was to combat all that misinformation and do some course correction around it and educate people about the ABC test and so on. But there were some pieces from that experience that I think there's just like a lot left for us as a labor force to talk about. For one, it was really disheartening to see a very small section of people try to claim an entire economy. Notably, majority white women were doing this, and there's like a particular class of freelancers that claim that they make six figures, which I don't believe in the first place. A lot of this was happening on Twitter, where we don't even know if the people are real or if they're being paid by like DNC or corporations or whoever. A lot of the misinformation turned out to come from Koch brothers entities like Americans for Prosperity. So like, to touch on something Kellie mentioned and James as well, it's like, it's a race to the bottom, but you're branded and spun to believe that you're flexing your independence. Like, that is what the Americans for Prosperity say, and that's the Koch brothers talking to you. It's like, no, it benefits you to stay poor. This is in your best interest, right? Like, we're not trying to hurt you. It's like, oh, okay, thanks. So Tedwood, I want to ask you about how these misinformation types have we seen these before? Is this a pattern that we've seen in labor organizing? Where does this come from? How does like the divide and conquer insidiousness function here? Can you take us through that a little bit?
I think it's really interesting to frame it in terms of it being a pattern. I think it absolutely is a pattern. And everything that's going on with the PRO Act right now, just the concept of card check, right? Is being used in misinformation campaigns that have been happening since the dawn of labor organizing itself. Generally, misinformation campaigns coming from the employer use, two broad tactics. They're going to use vinegar and they're going to use honey. The honey is basically like, these are all the nice things that we do for you already. Why do you need a union? The vinegar is like, this is what's going to happen if you join a union. It's going to destroy all these things that we've done for you. So the way card check and some of the things being espoused by the PRO Act come into play here is that, say you're pushing for card check. They're going to tell you that, hey, look, we already have a democratic process set up through the National Labor Relations Board. And don't you want to have an election? There's no way I'm recognizing this group of people who call themselves a union unless every employee gets a say in whether or not we get to have a union. And what they're not telling you is like, this is what they're saying in between the lines. I will not recognize these people as a union until I have had 4 to 6 weeks or however long I get to bully people out of wanting to have a union in the first place, right? So the spin and the misinformation is coming from a place of it's democracy in sheep's clothing. Well, it's I guess it's a wolf in sheep's clothing in regard to democracy. They're trying to pretend to be concerned about everybody's voice and opinions being heard whenever it benefits them. But of course, that actually works on people. So I think it's something to be aware of. Like every campaign that is running right now is looking forward to when the PRO Act actually passes. But since it hasn't, some of them are actually trying to use that rhetoric. Some of those workers are using the rhetoric to try to pressure employers to voluntarily recognize. And often, if you can keep the pressure on, it works, right? We've had a couple of campaigns in the last few months that have, won voluntary recognition through a really tough and long fight. So, but you can always expect, the boss to spin up a misinformation campaign to combat that. It's very important that you inoculate against that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I love it. Not actually love it when workplaces, when bosses are like, oh, we're a family here. They're starting to use this like family-based language of like, we take care of each other because we're a family. We don't need lawyers and unions like getting in the way of our relationships. And something that I really go ahead.
Yeah, hell yeah. I mean, they'll tell you all day, yeah, we're a family. We're a family. As long as we get to be the parents, right? And you do exactly, we get to make all the unilateral decisions and we decide how the rent gets paid and how we make the money, what we do with the money. Yeah, we're a family. But as soon as you want to be like, brothers and sisters, that's not the kind of family we want, right? We're a family that abuses you and you don't get to do anything about it.
Yeah. Well, I think that's such a strong point to take that further, Ted Wood. And I appreciate you jumping in and saying that. It's like something that I appreciated that you said earlier is that so much of labor organizing is about developing those relationships with your coworkers. And there is so much strength in having real person-to-person relationships. What happens to you happens to me, building that solidarity. And that's such an important part of this music. Or of this movement, right? So for me, I'm a freelancer. I'm a freelancer for the PRO Act. A part of being a freelancer for the PRO Act for me is really just because I love the idea of having an organized workforce, an organized labor force. And for me, like it really won't change all that much for me on a personal level. But there's something about relationships, there's something about solidarity, and there's something about making sure that everyone has what they need that draws me in to want to organize for this. Whether or not it necessarily affects my personal financial well-being, I know that it affects my siblings' personal financial well-being. And that's why I'm passionate about organized labor, as well as what organized labor can help us accomplish as a nation, as a people, especially as we're trying to build a socialist society. So I want to kick it over to Kellie and ask a kind of a big question, but what can we accomplish with an organized labor force? What are some of the things that you see that we could do together?
What can't be accomplished? I mean, that's, like you said, it's a loaded question, but one, being able to restore the balance between employers and workers, and being a worker and going to work and feeling dignified and respected and having a voice in your workplace, I think is very important. Workers will be able to have a voice in getting healthcare benefits, to be able to have a retirement plan. This is being able to build the middle class back up. And then I wanted to tie into what the current reality, what we're doing with the hate that we're seeing across the nation. When you are standing side by side with your brother and sister, you can't look at him if his skin color is different and not realize that this person is you're standing in solidarity with them. So I think it would cross the intersection between civil rights and labor rights. We would see a change on that front. How I started off, I think that the possibilities are endless and what we'll be able to do if we are able to organize across the board, but specifically here in the South. Here in the South, I think that we would see better wages. The possibilities are endless. I'll just leave it there.
Tedwood or James, do either of you want to respond to that question as well?
Yeah, I'll respond to the question. So if you have a well-paid workforce that is only having to work 40 hours a week like we used to where you could have a household with one income or two incomes if they chose to, now you're spending more time with your children if you have kids, or spending more time doing activities if you do not, and you'll see better education, because you can spend, if you're a child, you're not alone waiting for your parent to come home from their second or third job just trying to make money to make rent. You're going to have a healthier population because everyone's going to have health care, because I don't really see us passing universal health care in our near future. It's a hope of mine, but it's very difficult to do. But if you're only working 40 hours a week and you're making enough money, the money that you deserve to make working 40 hours a week, you can spend your free time doing the things that you want to do. So you're going to have a happier society. You're going to have less instances of depression. You're going to have a better educated society because your teachers are getting paid the money that they're supposed to be getting paid. And you have more time to spend with your children to help educate them and supplement the things that the school system may not be able to. So it's like, I agree with Kelly, what can't we do with this? And also, if you get it set up to where we actually have representatives from the workforce and from the union on the board of directors at these companies, that would be the ultimate goal. If we could get a position to where there is a union rep on the board and a rank and file worker on the board of directors for these companies, I think everything would be better on that. I think there's nowhere we can't go with that.
Thank you, James. I want to, before we start to wrap this panel up, in the beginning I said I wanted to strive to connect labor issues with everything else that's happening in our world. To kind of further expand on that, when I started to do my research on the PRO Act and stepping into organizing a little bit with the freelancers, all of this was happening as the Derek Chauvin trial was starting and beginning to unfold. And one thing that I could not push out of my mind, probably just because of the frame of mind I was in with like my work and everything, the thing I couldn't drive out of my mind is the fact that Derek Chauvin has a right to unionize and George Floyd did not. Breonna Taylor did not. And there's, like I said, another rash of police brutality happening. And then I went on to read other authors, also digging deeper into abolitionist organizing and transformative justice and the ins and outs of that and what that might look like in Atlanta and in Georgia. I mean, the fact that Derek Chauvin murdered George Floyd and then had access to a police union and millions of dollars for a legal defense fund and 12 attorneys, and we live in a society where I can't help but wonder if like we had an empowered labor workforce, what that would look like to fight for, $2,000 stimulus checks a month. If our government could have somehow pulled that off. Our current administration didn't even get the one-time $2,000 check right, but even if they did, like how that would have affected George Floyd so that he didn't have to use a counterfeit $20 bill to buy cigarettes that day. I'll kind of stop there, but I guess my question for you all, and all of you can respond to this, I think it's like, do you feel like the labor movement is an appropriate groundswell to connect all of these issues to help us combat like climate justice, inequity and equality, police brutality, displacement, and all those things? And if so, how can we communicate that in our organizing, that these are all connected issues here? Tedwood, why don't you go first?
Sure. I mean, I would say that it's the appropriate avenue to go through. And I think somebody pointed this out before that I think it was James actually. You know, the more free time that you have, the more that your necessary resources are taken care of, the more time you have to change the fucking world. Right? There is no good thing that I've ever tried to do in my life that wasn't mitigated in some way by the fact that I had to be somewhere for at least 8 hours during any given day for 5 days out of any given week, if not more than that. Or that I wasn't tired from doing those things and then chose not to, do those extra good things that I wanted to do to try to change the world. So yeah, I mean, building your power at work is the important issue in your lifetime. I don't care who you are or what issue you care about. It all comes down to the fact that we have to go to work every day and we don't really have any agency over that work. The more organized and disciplined and the more deep the relationships you can build with the people who are in your same situation, the better off you are going to be in exercising some agency over that fact. So I'll stop there. But I also want to note in the chat, I'm seeing there's an Omar Little there, and it's really tickling me. So happy that he's here.
Shout out to Omar and for all the comments on YouTube. Kelly, will you respond to this?
Yeah, I'll jump in. So I definitely think like appropriate is the right word. It is definitely appropriate because the workforce intersects all of the movements that you just mentioned. Black people are workers, Asian people are workers, Latinos are workers. So it crosses over into civil rights. We're going to have workers that are going to be on these new green jobs. So we do need to be a part of this conversation. We have to, as a labor movement, we have to take a stand in all of this conversation because we are going to represent the people that are going to be dealing with these issues and with this new reality, or in the case of what is happening with the Black Lives Matter, this not a new reality. This has been happening for a long time, but this new reality around green jobs, we are going to be a part of this conversation because we are representing the workers. And I will say, once you, somebody mentioned this before, James, he said it's a rising tide. Once you lift we in the labor movement, we are looking to raise the floor for all working people because we know that once we do that, then the playing field is level. It's not just for organized working. We are going across the board, raising the playing field for everybody.
Yeah, I just want to add on that. Kelly is 100% right. In our collective bargaining agreement with the IBEW, if you're classified as a journeyman electrician, it doesn't matter if you're gay, straight, black, brown, white, male, or female. That is the wage that you are being paid. There is no sexual discrimination as far as wage within most of the building trades. It's whatever's in the agreement. As long as you qualify, that's what you get paid.
So thank you all so much for that. So just kind of as we start wrapping up, I want to ask, what do we need to do? We got to pass the PRO Act. We know that that's the first step. Of course, we have so many battles ahead of us when it comes to organizing the workforce. And I think we'll get there because we have to. Our planet depends on it. Racial justice depends on it. Our lives literally depend on us building an organized workforce. And so we have to pass the PRO Act. That's one of the first steps in getting there. What do we need to be doing today to do that? Kelly, do you want to start on that?
Yeah, so here at the IUPAT, we have a campaign called Pass the PRO Act, and we're asking that whether you're an organization or individual, that you sign on, and we will be sending out emails and communications around campaigns that we have going on, putting pressure on our senators to make sure that they know that the community will hold them accountable if they do not vote yes on this on the PRO Act. Just continue to educate workers when you are at work. That's the best way to organize. Yes, as organizer, we can come into the workplace, but we do need workers talking to each other, making sure that we're educating each other, because as a worker, I'm going to listen to you, my friend, more than I am listening to somebody that I'm not, who I don't know. So make sure that we're educating our coworkers, and then just putting pressure on your senators, because the vote will be coming up. And that's my suggestion.
Thank you, Kelly. Tedwood, would you like to speak to what the next steps are for the PRO Act? And I also just want to let everyone know there is a lot of progress happening. Some of the biggest news is that we flipped Angus King in Maine to become a co-sponsor. That became official news either today or yesterday. I am losing track of time, generally speaking. I also want to give a shout out just to everyone in Atlanta and Georgia for all their organizing leading up to the election, because for once we are not a target state because our senators are already signed on and co-sponsored. So with all that being said, there is still a lot of work to do autonomously and in our local communities. So Tedwood, will you please tell us more about what we can do? Thanks.
So I'll definitely let James talk more about specifically what you can do to support the PRO Act and what we need to do to get to actually pass the damn thing. Firstly, I hate to feed the trolls, but yeah, Crusher45 in the comments, furries are workers too. I will acknowledge that. So I did want to plug one thing before I go. If you or anybody you know needs a job, and they don't mind getting paid $15 an hour, working 40 hours a week, if you can lift 50 pounds and pass a drug and background check, I think you should get in touch with me or Code CWA, because there's a data center run by Google in almost every major US city. And we would like you to go and work there for us or work for them so that you can give us information about the inside. So yeah, if you know anybody who needs a job and doesn't mind salting a data center between us girls, yeah, please hit me up.
Thank you, James. Why don't you take us through, or thank you, Tedwood, and now James, why don't you tell us more about next steps for the PRO Act and its eventual passage?
Well, the next step is to contact Kristen Sinema and Mark Kelly of Arizona and Manchin from Virginia. Those are the three holdouts that we have. And find their legislative staff's phone numbers, send them emails, make phone calls. If you get enough people to call their offices and call their staff members on this, you will get the attention of those senators. And this is something that we've been working on. We're going to be plugging it at the end of April. Just to let everybody out there know, April 28th is Workers' Memorial Day. That is when the federal government passed the OSHA Act, the Occupational Safe and Health Administration Act. And so we as AFL affiliates are targeting that week, basically April, I think 26th through May 1st. And we're going to be phone banking into Arizona, and we're going to be phone banking into Virginia. Writing letters is another way to go. Basically getting their attention, letting them know that if you are a Democrat, you were elected on the ideal that you were going to protect the workers of your state that you represent. And there's nothing clearer than this bill to protect the workers and working families of the state. So phone bank, write letters. They're doing virtual meetings right now. Nobody's meeting in person, which is hard, because if you could drive up to DC and then meet them in person, that's also very effective. But the next step is to get to the 50 vote threshold that we need to have the Vice President and the President of the Senate, Kamala Harris, make the tie-breaking vote to pass this bill. We're also going to need pressure to get rid of the filibuster, which is another old Jim Crow, actually pre-Jim Crow, pre-Civil War racist thing that they used to stop minorities from moving forward in this country. Look at the history of the filibuster whenever you have time, and you'll see how rampantly racist it is, and we need to get rid of it. Now, if a legislator wants to stand and speak till they can't stand anymore, that's fine. I'm fine with going back to Mr. Smith goes to Washington style filibuster. But the way the filibuster works right now is not even the senator doesn't even have to be present. Their legislative aide could call down and say, oh, on SR 287, Senator so-and-so disagrees with this bill and he wants to filibuster. That's it. A phone call from a legislative aide can enact the filibuster rule the way it is right now. And so we need to get rid of the filibuster so we can get the PRO Act passed. We need to put pressure on our 2 Arizona senators and our senator from Virginia and cross that threshold, because there's other legislation that we want passed as well. HR 1 and HR 4, which are the voting rights bills, we need those passed as well. And we may have to break the mold to get it done, and I think we need to do that.
Yeah, just real quick on that. We've already seen what, in my opinion, was the Biden administration abandoning workers with the not passing the $15 minimum wage in the COVID relief bill that they passed. Right now, the Biden administration has put the PRO Act in their platform as a piece of their infrastructure bill that they're hoping to pass through the reconciliation process again, as they did the last bill. And I'm curious, and any of you can answer this really, but I was going to ask it specifically to James. I'm curious, how does that change the way that we organize for the PRO Act? And why is it still important, even though it's already in the bill, why is it still important that we're calling these senators who may not be in favor of passing the PRO Act?
Mostly because we need 50% plus 1 in order for this legislation to carry. And so even if they get rid of the filibuster, even if it's put into a different piece of legislation, basically a budget reapportionment bill, you still need 50 plus 1. And we're at 47 right now. So we need those 3 votes to get it to the 50% to where the vice president can get a tie-breaking vote and pass that legislation. I will, on a side note, say that part of the relief package that was passed, yes, the $15 minimum wage wasn't put into that bill, but one of the things we were able to get into that bill was the Bush-Lewis Act, which shored up and saved the multi-employer pension plan in the United States, which, if it wasn't corrected within 5 years, around 10 to 15 million Americans would have lost their retirement. So, yes, we lost the $15, but there also was some good in that bill as well.
Yeah, certainly not all bad, and some of it did definitely impacted working families in several great ways, and don't want to skip over that. I also do want us to not get complacent in organizing for the PRO Act just because Biden has put it in his new infrastructure bill. They could very easily use that as one of the throwaway items, and we need to ensure that that is something that can't be thrown out of that bill. So just before we wrap up, does anybody have anything to add to that, or any kind of parting words that you want to say?
I just wanted to thank Kelly and James for being here. It was really cool hearing your perspectives on the PRO Act. I think I learned a lot myself, and appreciate Atlanta DSA and Nolan and Asia for hosting.
I'll say thank you for the solidarity. I'm on my phone looking at the comments, and I appreciate it. I'm glad you guys are in listening. I learned a lot, and we got work to do. We got work to do, guys.
We got work to do. That's right.
Thank you all for being here. Go ahead, James.
I would just say, following up on Kelly's, we have work to do, and the work never stops. So we got to keep going and keep pushing forward.
Yeah, we are a process. It's all a process. It's not about the point. So thank you all for being here and being part of that process and educating us and having these conversations. I was so grateful to be here.
Yeah, same here. Thank you all. Hey, if you want to get involved with passing the PRO Act and you live in the Atlanta area, you can go to atldsa.org/pro. If you are not in the Atlanta area, I think you can still organize with us for that, but you could also go to dsausa.org/pro act and help us get this PRO Act passed. Quite literally, our futures depend on this as a first step. So let's do it. Thank you all so much for joining us.